Welcome to Cinemabites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie begins in 1944 during World War II in the Pacific Ocean. We see an American plane crash and get destroyed. The pilot of the plane manages to jump out and save his life. He notices that the enemy's plane also crashes. The Japanese pilot survives, and the American pilot runs toward him, trying to kill him by shooting him. However, none of the bullets hit the Japanese pilot, and the American pilot runs out of ammunition. He starts running as the Japanese pilot points his weapon at him, but the Japanese pilot also runs out of bullets. The Japanese pilot chases after the American pilot into the jungle. Eventually, they reach a cliff, forcing the American to fight. The Japanese pilot has a sword, while the American fights unarmed. The Japanese pilot overpowers the American in the fight and is about to kill him when suddenly a giant gorilla strikes the ground with its hand. Both men are terrified and stop fighting. The story then shifts to 1973, where we meet two scientists named Bill and Brooks. Bill and Brooks meet with a government official and show him a satellite image of an island shaped like a skull. They explain that this island is unexplored and request permission to investigate it. They mention that the island is unusual because planes that fly over it crash and ships that pass near it sink. The government official is not interested and dismisses them, but Bill and Brooks persist, explaining that the Russians are also interested in exploring the island and could reach it within 3 days. They argue that they need to act quickly and get ahead of the Russians. Eventually, the official contacts General Packard and requests that he accompany the scientists and their team to Skull Island. General Packard is initially reluctant as he was planning to take a vacation, but he agrees to the mission. Bill and Brooks then approach a retired Air Force officer named James, who is skilled in tracking and has experience in the jungle. They explain the mission to him and offer him money for his assistance. James considers the mission dangerous and demands 5 times the original payment, which they agree to. James asks what they are specifically looking for, but Bill tells him they need his expertise in exploring dangerous areas. Next, we meet a photographer named Mason, who learns about the Skull Island mission and requests to join to document the exploration with her camera. She is accepted into the mission. The entire team gathers at the port to board a ship for the journey. The soldiers accompanying them are unhappy as they were supposed to be on leave. A NASA representative named Victor is also part of the team. Victor briefs them about the island, explaining that trade routes avoid it and that it is constantly surrounded by storms, making it hidden. However, General Packard has advanced aircraft that will help them enter the island, making them the first team in history to explore it. The mission leaders include Bill, biologist San, and geologist Brooks. Brooks explains that they will drop bombs on the island to measure the Earth's density. Soldier Chapman mentions that the storms around the island will cut off communication with the outside world, leaving them isolated until the supply team arrives in 3 days at the island's northern point. The supply team will bring weapons, food, and water. The group sets off on the ship towards Skull Island. As they approach, they see that the storm surrounding the island is larger than expected. Victor suggests postponing the mission, but Bill disagrees and insists on continuing. The final decision is left to Packard, who decides to proceed. The team boards their aircraft and flies toward the island, entering the intense storm filled with rain and lightning. The planes shake violently, but Packard's advanced aircraft withstand the storm, and they successfully reach the island. The island is revealed to be beautiful with natural landscapes. They fly over the island until they find a clearing to land and set up their equipment. Everything goes smoothly until suddenly a giant tree is hurled at one of the planes, destroying it completely. Another plane witnesses the event and sees a massive hand grabbing their aircraft. The soldiers on board see Kong, who destroys the plane and eats one of the soldiers. The remaining planes circle around Kong, terrified by his appearance. Kong roars at them, prompting them to open fire, but the bullets have no effect on him and only anger him further. Kong strikes a plane with his hand, bringing it down. He tries to grab another plane, injuring his hand on its propeller, causing it to crash into the jungle. Packard orders a support team to assist the downed plane, but Kong crushes the support team underfoot, killing them. Kong destroys all the surrounding planes, killing any humans he encounters on the ground. Packard's plane narrowly escapes the chaos. Kong throws a soldier into the air, who collides with the plane carrying Jason and Mason, causing it to crash into the jungle. Kong grabs a plane from the ground and throws it at another plane in the air, only stopping once he has destroyed all the aircraft around him. Packard watches in shock as Kong leaves the area. Due to the events, the team splits into 2 groups. Jason's group realizes they are near the river and must head north to reach the supply point, as there is no other way off the island since all the planes have been destroyed. Meanwhile, Packard contacts the survivors, and Chapman responds, informing him that he is the sole survivor from his plane. Chapman gives his location to Packard before the signal cuts off. Packard searches the area, gathering the remaining soldiers. He then meets Bill, sits with him, and points a weapon at him, and he says to him, "Tell me the truth. Why did you come to this island?" Bill begins to tell the truth. 20 years ago, I was on a ship with my family, and mythical creatures attacked the ship. I was the only survivor, and all my family died. I kept telling everyone that mythical creatures attacked us, and that these creatures exist, but no one believed me. The government announced that those on the ship drowned. To prove I was telling the truth, I started studying mythical creatures, ones like Kong, but I couldn't prove they existed. So, I decided to return to the island and invent any excuse to convince the council to send a military team with me. I threw bombs on the island to make Kong appear. My goal wasn't to explore the island. It was to document the gorilla and mythical creatures with witnesses to see what happened. Packard gets very angry at his trivial reason for gathering everyone on the island, especially since many many of his men died because of him. But he decides to let Bill live. He decides to head west first to find Chapman, and after finding him, they'll head north to reach the rendezvous point. They hold a funeral for the soldiers who died, and Packard vows to avenge his men from Kong. We then go to James's team, where Brooks tells them, Bill hired me because I'm skilled in geology, but he never mentioned the giant gorilla that just attacked us. Later, James's team tries to communicate with the others, but the signal is cut off. They pass by a lake and suddenly see a giant buffalo in front of them. A team member named Silvaco raises his weapon at it, but James makes him lower it because the buffalo was calm and did not attack them. The buffalo looks at them for a while, then leaves peacefully. Meanwhile, Packard's group searches for Chapman in the jungle. While walking, one of the soldiers is killed by a large stick that goes through his mouth. When they look up, they discover that the stick is the leg of a giant spider. The soldiers panic and start shooting at it, but the spider grabs one of them, Miles. The soldiers stop shooting and start cutting the spider's legs to save their comrade. Miles cuts the spider's feelers, manages to escape, and falls to the ground. They open fire on the spider and kill it completely. They continue their journey, but their morale drops as more soldiers die. We return to James's team, who walk several kilometers and reach a place resembling a temple. As they inspect the area, a tribe appears and raises knives at them. An old man emerges from the tribe and introduces himself to James's team, saying, "My name is Hank." It turns out that Hank is the American officer we saw at the beginning of the World War II scene in 1944. Hank has been on the island since then, living there for 29 years with the tribe. The tribe lives in a small village, and they adore Kong, revering him as a deity. Kong also loves them and protects them from dangerous creatures. Hank explains that the tribe lives in fear of the mythical creatures until Kong's parents appeared and began protecting the tribe. After many battles, Kong's parents fought the creatures. Unfortunately, Kong's parents died, and Kong became the king of the island. His life's mission is to protect the tribe. He tells them that Kong attacked them because they threw bombs, awakening the mythical creatures. Kong had to engage in battles with many creatures in a short time. Luckily, the strongest creature among them hasn't appeared yet. This creature killed Kong's parents and is currently resting after its battle with them. But it's only a matter of time before it awakens, and no one knows if Kong will survive to confront it. We quickly shift to Chapman, who was washing in the water. Chapman is startled when Kong arrives at the lake. Chapman runs in fear and hides. We see Kong injured in his arm from his fight with the soldiers. Chapman watches as Kong drinks from the water. Suddenly, a giant squid attacks Kong, wrapping around him. Kong fights it, crushes its head, eats its tentacles, and leaves the lake after defeating it. Back at the village, James tells Hank they are heading north because there are supplies waiting there, and they plan to escape the island. Hank tells them, "I know this island very well, and let me tell you, if you travel on foot, there's no way you'll reach the northern part of the island within 3 days. The path is too long." Hank shows them a boat he has been building from the remains of 2 planes. After the Japanese pilot died from one of the creatures, Hank couldn't finish the boat alone. James decides to help Hank complete the boat. Mason wanders around, filming the tribe. She hears a strange sound and decides to investigate. She finds a giant buffalo trapped under a plane and unable to move. Mason decides to rescue it, trying to lift the plane off it. She struggles but is unable to. Suddenly, Kong arrives, lifts the plane, and throws it aside. He does nothing to Mason and leaves. We return to Packard, who is still heading west. He and his men see a giant bloodstain on the mountain and realize it's Kong's blood, giving them hope that they can kill him. We shift back to Chapman, who tries to communicate with Packard. Chapman is shocked to find himself sitting on a mythical creature disguised as a tree. Chapman grabs his weapon and shoots at it in fear, but the creature turns out to be harmless and walks away. However, the creature leaves because a dangerous monster appears and eats Chapman's head. After 24 hours, James and Hank are still working on the boat. They finally manage to finish it and set off north. Hank is hopeful about returning to his homeland. While on the boat, the radio starts working, and they manage to communicate with Packard's team. They ask Packard's team to light a flare in the sky to signal their location. Packard's team lights the flare, and the 2 groups locate each other. James's team on the boat celebrates. Suddenly, without warning, pterosaurs grab Victor and fly off with him. They tear his body apart in a horrifying scene. Hank and the others watch helplessly. Despite the tragedy, they decide to press on and meet up with Packard's team. The 2 teams finally reunite. Packard tells them, "Chapman is still alive, and I'm continuing west to find him." Hank objects, saying, "There are giant lizards in the west. If we go there, we'll put ourselves in danger." Packard tells James, "Your job is to track anything, so you should help us find Chapman." James agrees, and the entire team moves westward. They arrive at a place where there are skeletons of Kong's parents, and their tomb is filled with sulfur gas. They are forced to pass through the tomb to reach the other side. While they are halfway through, one of the soldiers sets off a jar symbol on the ground, which contains flammable materials, causing a massive chemical explosion. This explosion attracts the attention of a giant lizard. The team notices the lizard, so they hide behind the skeletons. The giant lizard approaches James, but suddenly it retreats to its nest. From the nest, it throws out Chapman's skull and chain, and James realizes that Chapman is dead. He remains still until the lizard leaves. Once it's gone, the entire team emerges from their hiding spot. Meanwhile, Bill had been filming the area with his camera, but unfortunately, the camera malfunctions, flickering on and off. This light attracts the lizard, which swallows Bill whole before disappearing into the smoke. After this incident, the team splits up, each member taking a position to kill the lizard. Hank, who is familiar with this creature, takes the lead, waiting for it to attack. When it approaches, he manages to dodge it and strikes its legs with his sword. The soldiers open fire on the lizard, which runs at full speed toward one of the soldiers and swallows follows him. It then chases Mason, but Mason runs into a narrow area the lizard cannot navigate. Packard sends one of his men with flammable materials to set the lizard on fire, but the lizard throws him instead, causing an explosion due to the flammable substances he was carrying. Silvko, who was near the explosion, loses consciousness, and a gas hatch opens beside him, releasing birds. The soldiers shoot at the birds. Jason grabs Hank's sword, puts on a mask, and enters a smoke-filled area. He bravely fights and kills the birds until he reaches Silvko. However, the lizard arrives at their location. Luckily, Mason intervenes and throws a flare at the lizard, causing a massive explosion due to the sulfur in the air. The lizard explodes, and the team escapes the tomb and continues on their way. Hank tells Packard that he warned them not to take this path because it's full of giant creatures, and this lizard was only the first of them. Packard, still determined to kill Kong, ignores everyone's objections. The team tries to explain that Kong is a good creature and not as dangerous as they thought, and they explain why Kong attacked them. But Packard refuses to listen and insists on killing Kong for revenge. Hank becomes angry, draws his sword on Packard, but Packard disarms him. Packard's soldiers side with him. Jason calms the situation down, telling Packard to go to the rendezvous point with his men to get weapons and supplies as he wishes, while Jason and his team return to the boat and wait for them. They agree and split into two groups again. On their way, Packard and his men find Chapman's belongings and take them to return to his family. They begin setting up an ambush for Kong. Meanwhile, James and Mason climb a mountain to look for the boat and spot it in the middle of the river. Suddenly, Kong appears in front of them. Kong allows Mason to touch him, as he senses she is good and was trying to save the buffalo earlier. He does not react aggressively. Meanwhile, Packard's team causes explosions in the forest to attract Kong's attention. Kong moves toward the explosions, and Jason, Mason, and Hank realize it's a trap and rush to save Kong. Kong reaches the soldiers and roars, walking through the water, searching for the source of the explosions. Packard throws flammable materials into the water, setting Kong on fire. At first, Kong suffers intense pain and struggles to move, but he eventually frees himself from the flames and crushes one of the soldiers with his foot. Exhausted, Kong collapses to the ground. Packard orders the soldiers to place explosives around Kong to kill him for good. However, the soldiers hesitate after witnessing Kong's suffering. Jason and Mason arrive, defending Kong and pointing their weapons at Packard and his soldiers. The situation escalates, with everyone pointing weapons at each other. Silvko turns against Packard and raises his weapon. Jason urges everyone to lower their weapons, but their argument is interrupted by a loud noise from the water. A larger, more menacing lizard emerges, the same creature that killed Kong's parents. Everyone flees except Packard, who stays to activate the explosives and kill Kong. But Kong regains consciousness, grabs Packard, and crushes him in his hand. Kong engages in a fierce battle with the lizard. Being injured and exhausted, Kong struggles, and the lizard gains the upper hand. The team reaches the edge of the island to save themselves, but some members are still far behind. Jason asks Mason to climb the highest mountain and fire a flare into the sky to signal the rest of the team. As Mason moves to do so, the lizard approaches the team. One of the soldiers sacrifices himself to buy time for the others to escape, and he takes out all his grenades and stands in front of the lizard. But his sacrifice was in vain, as the lizard struck him with its tail and threw him into the air, and the soldier died with his grenades. And everyone thinks the lizard will win, but Kong arrives and strikes the lizard on the head with force, but the lizard is not affected, and the lizard goes to strangle Kong's neck, and Kong grabs the lizard's jaw to free himself, and he was about to split it in two, but the lizard escaped from him and went to grab Kong's arm, and it wrapped around Kong and pushed him towards an old shipwreck, and Kong got stuck in the ship's chains and couldn't get free. And despite being tied up, Kong makes a great effort in the battle, and everyone thinks this is the end, but Brooks opens fire on the lizard with a weapon on the boat, so the lizard leaves Kong and heads towards him, and Mason hits the lizard in the eye with a flare, so the lizard can't see well, and Kong makes a great effort to free himself, and he succeeds in getting up again, but there was still a chain attached to his arm that was connected to the ship's propeller, so Kong throws the propeller at the lizard's back and goes to it and strangles the lizard with the chain, and then he grabs the lizard and throws it onto the mountain that Mason was standing on, so Mason falls from the top of the mountain into the water. The lizard tried to attack Kong again, but Kong was able to land several blows to its face, causing it severe damage and making it faint, and then Kong reached his hand into the water and pulled Mason out, and Kong remembers that everything is now fine, but the lizard deceives him and attacks him again from behind, wrapping its tongue around Kong's arm. But Kong's strength was immense, and he pulled the lizard's tongue completely, separating it from its body, and with that, the lizard finally died, and Kong avenged the death of his father and mother. After that, Kong finally looks at them and walks away, and all the people who managed to survive Tango agreed not to speak about what happened on the island ever, so the animals could live in peace. Hank was eager to return home and see his wife and son, whom he hadn't seen in 29 years. They reached the meeting point where planes were waiting for them, and with that, we come to the end of the episode. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button so you never miss an updates. Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. The movie begins with a television ad about a failed experiment by a pharmaceutical company. They had created a drug called neonsilin to treat diabetes, but unfortunately, the people they tested it on turned into zombies. The problem was that this happened without the consent of the people and without respecting the laws. One day, in the company's secret headquarters, a mysterious figure emerges from the darkness, walking on the ground until he rises from underground. This was one of the people who had been tested with the drug and turned into a zombie because of it. This zombie wasn't like any other. He came from underground and headed to a city called Bongsan. On the way, a couple driving a car suddenly stopped to catch their breath after a minor accident. They met their mechanic, John Gull, who was holding a metal rod and started fiddling with their car. It turned out that this man wanted to forcefully create work by causing accidents to attract customers. The couple didn't suspect anything and allowed him to take the car for repairs. In the morning, they came to pay the bill and were shocked to find it extremely expensive. The husband tried to argue, saying, "This is fraud," but his pregnant wife, Namjo, who was in charge of collecting money, hid the money away from John Gull because she didn't want to deal with him. He was always busy. In another scene, the zombie sees some girls walking in the street and tries to grab them to eat them, but they easily avoid him. A child nearby tells him, "Why don't you sit down for a while?" and starts throwing small objects at him. The zombie even fails to eat a stray dog, which runs after him like a mad creature, barking furiously. Meanwhile, at John Gull's house, his father Mandyuk was playing cards with his friends as usual. Suddenly, he hears a dog barking outside and says, "What's going on? Something's wrong." Mandyuk goes outside to chase the barking dog, unaware that the zombie is hiding in the bathroom. Mandyuk enters the bathroom to confront the zombie, but the zombie suddenly appears and attacks him. The elderly man is bitten by the zombie before he manages to escape. The zombie flees into the street and encounters Gull, who hits the zombie. Later, everyone finds themselves running away from another stray dog, and the scene is quite funny. Gull falls on the road, making it easy for the zombie to attack a woman. But before he bites her, a huge car comes speeding by and runs him over, throwing him to the ground. Miraculously, the zombie survives and runs away again. The elderly Mandyuk returns home from the hospital after his wound has been treated. He carries something with him, a large picture of Hawaii. His lifelong dream was to go there, and he always wore a Hawaii-themed t-shirt to imagine himself there. Meanwhile, the zombie continues running through the village. Gull hears a strange noise coming from the garage. He and Mandyuk go to check it out and discover the zombie hiding inside. Mandyuk strikes the zombie with an axe to take his revenge. Later, John Gull arrives and engages in a flying battle with the zombie. Now the whole family is in the garage, turning the zombie into a combat target. They are convinced he's dead, but this zombie isn't easy. He suddenly gets up and terrifies the family. They run outside the garage and lock him in. Finally, Gull, who is Gull's uncle, tells them this might be a zombie, pointing to a scene from the movie Train to Busan to explain how zombies are created when someone is bitten. They finally understand that anyone bitten by a zombie turns into one. So the mother, Namjo, decides to hit Mandyuk with a frying pan to protect him and calm him down. The next day, Gull searches the internet for information about zombies and tells the rest of the family that anyone bitten by a zombie comes back to life and turns into one. Mandyuk's family is confused about what's happening and decides to leave the zombie in the garage in peace. Suddenly, Gull proposes killing Mandyuk before the zombie kills them. At that moment, Mandyuk steps out of the trailer and enters the house, but Gull hits him on the head without realizing it, causing the family to scold him for his actions. Later, Gull decides to give the zombie a name, Chunji, and treat him like a pet. Meanwhile, Namjo thinks he won't harm them, but decides to remove all his teeth to ensure safety. The next day, everyone is surprised that Mandyuk hasn't turned into a zombie as expected. On the contrary, he starts looking younger due to the infection. His friends notice him urinating like a young man and begin asking him about the secret to his newfound youth. One of them, who is about to get married, offers him a ticket to Hawaii to learn the secret. Mandyuk tells him everything about Chunji, but this conversation is overheard by Gull, who comes up with the idea to sell Chunji for money. Meanwhile, Mandyuk packs his bag to go to Hawaii, but his friends come knocking on his door. Mandyuk's friends have all learned about Chunji, and each one wants to pay to restore their youth. So Mandyuk takes them to the garage, only to find Chunji missing. Gull had taken Chunji and was heading to Seoul to sell him to a pharmaceutical company. But on the way, the police stop Gull for speeding. The police recognize him because they're from the same village. After a while, they hear noises coming from the car trunk. When they open it, they find Chunji tied up inside. Later, the police take them to the station, and Mandyuk immediately comes and tells the police that Chunji is his son. At night, Gull feeds Chunji a plate of lettuce, but he can't eat it because he has no teeth. Mandyuk discovers this and is astonished. Mandyuk's friends decide to come over to rejuvenate themselves. So Mandyuk comes up with a plan and creates artificial teeth for the zombie, starting a new business. The business is like a lemonade stand, but much stranger. At first, Mandyuk's friends are hesitant, but eventually, they get used to it. In the end, Namjo collects all the money in a safe box. The next day, all the people who were bitten by Chunji start running through the streets like maniacs. The people who got stung by Chunji are so happy because they've become young again. But suddenly, Mandyuk finds himself in trouble. Everyone surprises him by saying he's run out of money. That's because he took all the money and traveled to Hawaii. At the same time, news about Chunji started spreading in the village, and people kept coming to Junggol to get stung. Their money increased so much that trucks were filled with people coming to get stung. After a few days, they decided to renovate Mandyuk's trailer so Chunji could live in in it. They even bought him new teeth so he could eat lettuce like humans. One day, Hegel took Chunji to the barber to get groomed, and after the makeover, Chunji looked like a handsome young man. Meanwhile, Hegel started feeling that they were exploiting Chunji for money and began to fall in love with him. One night, Hegel overheard her brother Mingul talking to someone about selling Chunji. So the next day, she decided to take him to the forest and let him escape to live his life. But unfortunately, Chunji, who had also started to love her, told her he wouldn't leave because he enjoyed earning money from the stings. He decided to continue working with them. At the same time, at the wedding of one of Manduk's friends, the people who had been stung started behaving strangely. They felt hot, as if they were hungry, or experiencing something unnatural. Mingul discovered that Chunji was missing and rushed to find him to sell him and get the money. On his way, he found Chunji in the place where Hegel had left him and took him to the bus station. Back at the wedding, the priest told the couple to kiss, but instead of kissing, the groom bit his wife. Suddenly, everyone discovered that anyone bitten by Chunji had turned into a zombie. Chaos ensued. Everyone became zombies, and the virus spread rapidly. Even people at the bus station started biting each other. Then, the streets were filled with zombies, and each person turned the next into a zombie. After a while, a zombie entered the garage and attacked Hegel. She ran to her parents' house screaming until a policeman arrived and tried to intervene, but he got bitten. This zombie didn't want lettuce, he wanted bacon. Manduk's family realized they needed to escape, so they ran to the house and sealed all the windows and doors. In a book about surviving zombies, Mingul had written some ideas about how to deal with zombies, but unfortunately, they misunderstood some of them. In the end, they managed to create shields using available tools. Meanwhile, at the bus station, Mingul somehow survived the attack and drove back to his house, leaving Chunji behind. On his way, he discovered that almost everyone in the village had turned into zombies. After a while, the zombies entered the house and started chasing the family. Namjo almost got killed, but managed to grab her money box and escape. After that, the family hid in the garage, and Mingul brought some fireworks. He lit them and threw them at the zombies, but he didn't realize he was igniting a gas station. He quickly drove to stop the fireworks, but suddenly the car exploded in flames. Of course, this attracted the zombies, who ran toward the burning car. The fireworks continued to explode above them, and the zombies seemed mesmerized as if enchanted. At that moment, Namjo went into labor. Yungol and Mingul dressed in Chunji's clothes to disguise themselves as zombies and escape, but they forgot the keys inside the house. Moreover, when the car started and its lights turned on, the zombies' attention was drawn again, leaving them frozen in fear, surrounded by the fiery zombies. Hegel decided to go out with a lawnmower, attacking the zombies to protect them, but unfortunately, her arm was overwhelmed. Just as they were about to die, Chunji came to her rescue. Amid the chaos, one of the zombies moved the wires strangely, and the city's lights suddenly turned on, distracting the remaining zombies and leaving Chunji and Hegel safe. This was their chance to escape. Mingul decided to go inside to retrieve the keys from the house, but before he could reach them, the lights suddenly went out, and the zombies surrounded him. At that moment, they heard a baby's cry, and Mingul decided to sacrifice himself to get the keys and return quickly. The baby and Namjo were inside the trailer attached to the car. In the car, Yungol was ready to drive to escape, but Hegel and Chunji were facing the zombies to protect the trailer. Mingul finally managed to get the keys and return to the car, but the zombies were still on their way. Mingul threw the keys to Hegel, and the family managed to escape in the car, leaving Chunji and the zombies behind. In the end, Chunji set the place ablaze, causing an explosion that destroyed the gas station. The next morning, Jungol woke up, and for the first time, everyone was shocked because he had turned into a zombie. The family locked him in the car and ran outside. While planning their next move, they heard someone coming from the tunnel. It was Manduk, who had returned from his trip to Hawaii, looking sunny and cheerful, unaware of what had happened in their village. When the family saw Manduk still alive and not turned into a zombie like everyone else, they were surprised. Coincidentally, the radio announced that the virus had spread across Korea and that people immune to the virus could be the cure to turn zombies back into humans. Mingul came up with a new idea. He wanted to exploit Manduk's immunity and turn it into a new business. 6 months passed, and the virus had spread across Korea, but the family was thriving. Manduk started biting people to turn them back into humans, and Chunji turned into a human again in the same way. In the end, the movie concludes with the family sitting in front of their trailer, with a long line of zombies waiting to be cured. If you liked this ending, don't forget to support us with a like and subscription so we can continue bringing you the best